A woman who is described as controlling, demanding, dominating, and a serious force to be reckoned with, is often called a man-eater. However, one Australian woman would take on the term quite literally. Katherine "Kathy" Mary Knight was born on October 24, 1955 in Tenterfield, a town in New South Wales, Australia, to parents Kenneth "Ken" Charles Knight and Barbara Rofin. Before meeting and cohabitating with Katherine's father, Barbara had been married to Ken's friend and co-worker John Jack Rofin. The couple had 4 sons, Patrick, Martin, Neville, and Barry, whom they raised in the small town of Aberdeen. Barbara began an affair with Ken, and the couple was immediately ostracized by those in the conservative rural town. The backlash from the scandal made them feel compelled to move away so they could continue their lives together without dirty looks and whispered remarks. Barbara ran away with Ken to the nearby town of Moree. Unfortunately, Barbara chose not to take any of her sons, leaving a heartbroken John to make the despairing decision to separate his boys. His 2 eldest sons remained with him, while the youngest boys were shipped off to Sydney to be raised by their aunt. Barbara and Ken went on to have 4 children of their own: son Charlie, twin daughters Joy and Kathy, and son Shane. In 1959, a few years after their departure, ex-husband Jack passed away, and eldest sons Patrick and Martin were sent to join their mother's new clan. Ken and Barbara ran a debilitated household, having lasting effects on Kathy's psyche. Ken was a haggard drunk who would relentlessly rape Barbara without regard for the children being present. Perhaps due to the deplorable acts the sons regularly witnessed, they followed suit and began sexually assaulting Kathy in her youth until about age 11. Kathy felt she had no one but her twin sister Joy and Uncle Oscar to count on, though a devastating turn of events would lead Uncle Oscar to commit suicide in 1969, at which point the family moved away to Aberdeen. Kathy attended Muswellbrook High School, where she obtained good grades, but was known to be a loner and a bully. Her lack of control at home may have been the reasoning behind her tyrant behavior at school. After a few incidents involving physical assault, Kathy left school at the ripe age of 15 and sought employment at a clothing factory as a cutter. A year later, she began her dream job at the local slaughterhouse. She thrived in her position as a cutter and swiftly moved up to boning, and was rewarded with a personal set of butcher's knives. She held such pride in her new position that she displayed her knives above her bed when not in use. When questioned about the knives in later testimonies, she said she hung them over the bed because they would always be handy if she needed them. It was at the slaughterhouse where she would meet David Stanford Kellett. The two started a relationship soon after meeting in 1973. David shared the same drunkard traits as her father. Perhaps the familiarity outweighed the red flags. The two became a powerhouse couple, happily becoming physical with anyone who upset them. The domineering couple decided to marry just a year later in 1974. They showed up on a motorcycle and were extremely intoxicated. Upon arrival, Barbara pulled David aside, warning him about her daughter and her erratic behavior, stating, "Watch out. You better watch this one or she'll fucking kill you. Stir her up the wrong way or do the wrong thing, and you're fucked. Don't ever think of playing up on her. She'll fucking kill you." And that was her mother talking. She told me she's got something loose. She's got a screw loose somewhere. Later that evening, he got his first taste of Kathy's rage when she attempted to strangle him for consummating the marriage only 3 times. Kathy's violence would continue throughout the marriage. She burned David's belongings and hit him across the head with a frying pan after arriving home late. Her antics led David to flee the scene and seek help from neighbors, where he collapsed and was later treated for a severely fractured skull. Though he initially wanted to press charges, a witty Kathy talked him out of it. Despite the chaos, the couple welcomed their first child, Melissa Ann, in May 1976. Soon after, David left Kathy for another woman and moved away. Kathy continued to behave unhinged and was witnessed violently shaking her newborn daughter's carriage while on a walk in the town. Authorities were informed, and Kathy was admitted to St. Elmo's Hospital in Tamworth, where they diagnosed her with postpartum depression, though she was released after a few weeks. With her mental stability at an all-time low, upon her release, she took a now 2-month-old Melissa to a train station and placed her on the tracks. She left the baby, went into town, stole an axe, and proceeded to terrorize patrons. Thankfully, while Kathy was having her axe-waving rant, a homeless man saw Melissa on the train tracks and rescued her, just minutes before a train passed. Again, authorities were informed and she was returned to St. Elmo's Hospital, this time signing herself out after only 1 day, claiming to have been completely cured. Just a few days later, Kathy slashed 16-year-old Margaret Macbeth's face when she refused to drive her to Queensland, where David had now been residing. The woman was able to escape and call the police. When police arrived, Kathy grabbed a child and held him hostage, threatening him with her knife. Police were able to disarm her, and she was then taken to Morisset Psychiatric Hospital, where she admitted to a harrowing plan. She told them she wanted to kill the mechanic who fixed David's car, as she believed he was the reason for his escape to Queensland. She then wanted to kill David, his mother, and his new girlfriend. Police informed David of her plan. However, instead of continuing to stay away from a deranged Kathy, he decided to help and return to her. Kathy was released from the hospital on August 9, 1976, into David and his mother's care. Almost immediately after her release, she stabbed another individual, this time a police officer. However, charges were not pressed because the police stated people knew that was just how she was. Eventually, they all moved to Ipswich, where Kathy began working at Dinmore Meatworks, continuing her dream of being a butcher. The couple had another daughter together, Natasha Marie, on March 6, 1980. 4 years later, in 1984, Kathy decided to leave David and move to Muswellbrook, where she returned to the slaughterhouse. Her vigorous animal chopping led to a back injury, landing her on permanent disability a year after her return. Without being able to work, and no need to stay in the area, she moved to a government residence in Aberdeen, where she met and had flings with several men. In 1986, she met 38-year-old David Saunders. He moved in with Kathy and her daughters after a few short months. She would go on to display her mental instability by cutting the throat of his 2-month-old puppy and hitting him in the head with a frying pan to show him what would happen if he ever cheated or left her. Against his better judgment, he stayed with Kathy, and in June 1988, they welcomed Kathy's third daughter, Sarah. The couple then purchased a home together that Kathy strangely decorated with animal skins, skulls, horns, antlers, animal traps, old boots, machetes, rakes, saddles, and pitchforks. She also proudly displayed taxidermied peacocks and a baby deer. Any space not filled with these peculiar trinkets had old newspapers, clothes, books, and a video collection with predominantly suggestive subject matter. While the relationship initially seemed normal, it wasn't long before Kathy assaulted David with an iron to the face, stabbed him with a pair of scissors, cut up his clothes, and vandalized his car, forcing him to go into hiding. Her deranged antics landed her back in the mental facility. 2 years later, in 1991, Kathy fell pregnant with her fourth child and first son, Eric, with former co-worker and recovering alcoholic, 43-year-old John Chillingworth. Kathy's violence was, of course, a large part of their relationship. John admitted to hitting Kathy back once when she smacked the glasses off of his face and broke his teeth. 3 years into their relationship, Kathy had started having an affair with another man named John Charles Thomas Price and decided to leave John Chillingworth for him. John Price, a father of 3, was privy to Kathy's violent nature. However, it did not faze him, and he moved her into his home in 1995, where he resided with his 2 oldest children. He was described as friendly, well-liked, and a good provider, as his job in the mines came with a great salary, leaving his family wanting for nothing. Kathy pushed for him to marry her, but he refused, causing her to spiral. She sought revenge by telling his boss he had been stealing from his place of work. Though her allegations were false, this caused John to lose a position he proudly held for almost 20 years. He immediately kicked Kathy out of his house, but he soon let her back in and would once again regret the decision. In February 2000, Kathy stabbed John in the chest, leading him to take out a restraining order against her to protect himself and his children. He told co-workers that if he ever did not show up to work, they should immediately assume Kathy had killed him. They advised John to not return home, but against their wishes, he returned to his home around 11 p.m. after hiding out at his neighbor's home all evening. Kathy showed up while he slept, watched some television, took a shower, woke John, and initiated sexual contact, which he absent-mindedly gave into, and then fell asleep. Around 6 a.m. the next morning, on February 28, 2000, neighbors noticed his car was still in the driveway, which was unusual. When he didn't show up for work, his employer, remembering his warning, sent a worker to make a wellness check on John at his home. Upon his arrival to the home, he found neighbors also lurking about the property, peering and knocking on windows in hopes of catching John. They soon stumbled upon some blood near the front door and quickly called authorities. When police arrived around 8 a.m. to the Andrew Street home, they broke into the back door and were welcomed with a mortifying scene. Kathy was unconscious from an apparent suicide attempt by overdose and was taken to the hospital by ambulance, while the home told them a bloody tale. There were smears of blood everywhere, and a large pool located in the hallway. Evidence showed Kathy stabbed 44-year-old John in his sleep. He then awoke and tried to escape. Blood splatter showed he made his way around the home before managing to make it to the front door before either collapsing or being dragged back into the home where he bled out in the hallway. Detective Musio described what he saw that bloody day. "I remember walking down the hallway, and at about shoulder height there were all these blood splatter marks on the walls. To me, it's indicative of each attack. He's absolutely fighting for his life. The bloke's just had sexual intercourse in the bed, and when he wakes up, then stab, stab, stab. He's getting up. There is arterial spurting on the robe and the bed, and on the doorway there's a bloodied handprint, or swipe on the western side of the door near the dressing table, and blood around the light switch. It looks like he's tried to turn the light switch on, and then all down the hallway there are bloody handprints everywhere. And he's almost made it. He's opened the front door, the screen door is shut. There is blood staining trajectory again, flicking out across the front door. He's almost made it, but he wouldn't have survived. He would have been absolutely horrified, terrified, probably terrified more than horrified, trying to get out and all the time being stabbed. Autopsy would reveal he was stabbed about 40 times, many of which pierced through vital organs including his lungs, liver, kidneys, and aorta. After John was finally dead, Kathy took his bank card, went to a local ATM, and withdrew $1,000. After returning to the home, she skinned John, much like she'd do at the slaughterhouse she previously worked for. However, she made sure to leave a small flap of skin in order to hang the body at the entranceway of the home. She then hung his skin on a meat hook on the living room door. She proceeded to decapitate him and cook various parts of his body. She paired his body parts with baked potatoes, carrots, pumpkin, beets, zucchini, cabbage, yellow squash, and some gravy. She set the table and marked the place settings with the name of his children, so she can serve the revolting human meat of their own father to them. Kathy had apparently also served herself a plate of John's flesh, which she ate alongside the veggies she prepared. Further investigation led police to find John's head in a pot amongst the aforementioned vegetables, in what was described as a sickening stew. His skinless left arm was found posed with an empty soda bottle, and his legs were also posed in a crossed position. They also found a bloodied note Kathy had written, alleging that he raped one of her daughters and was the reason for her psychotic murderous rage, though the claims were clearly without basis. Kathy claimed she had no recollection of the stomach-churning murder, mutilation, and cannibalistic choices. During the trial, Kathy stuck with the notion that she did not remember what happened and offered to plead guilty to manslaughter, most likely in hopes of a lighter sentence. However, her plea was rejected, and on March 2, 2021, she was officially charged with murder, to which she pleaded not guilty. Due to several adjournments based on Kathy's mental state, the trial finally started on October 15, 2021. However, after jury selection, Kathy decided to change her plea from not guilty to guilty. Her counsel sent Kathy for psychiatric evaluations to ensure she was of sound mind in her decision to waive a right to a jury trial and plead guilty, especially after preparing a defense for months, which was inclusive of psychiatric support in her amnesia and dissociation claims. New evaluations did find her to be sane, though they concluded she suffered from borderline personality disorder. Although Kathy changed her plea to guilty, she continued to decline full responsibility for the egregious murder. During a sentencing hearing, when experts were set to take the stand to describe the chilling and disgusting scene, Kathy's counsel feared her reaction and requested that the judge allow her to leave the courtroom. The judge, rightfully so, denied their request. If she was able to act out such a heinous murder, she should be able to hear about it as well. However, just as her counsel thought, Kathy became violently hysterical during their testimony, leading her to be sedated. Kathy would also be forced to sit and listen to testimonies from her daughter, who told the court her mother said, "I told him if he took me back this time it was to the death, and if I kill John I'll kill myself after it." On November 8, 2021, Judge O'Keefe explained that due to the drastic nature of the crime and Kathy's lack of accountability and penitence, her sentence would be a harsh, yet well-deserved one. Judge O'Keefe stated the murder was carried out with considerable expertise and an obviously steady hand, so that his skin, including that of the head, face, nose, ears, neck, torso, genital organs, and legs, was removed so as to form one pelt. So expertly was it done that, after the post-mortem examination, the skin was able to be re-sewn onto John's body in a way which indicated a clear and appropriate, albeit grisly, methodology. The last minutes of his life must have been a time of abject terror for him, as they were a time of utter enjoyment for her. She has not expressed any contrition or remorse, and if released, she poses a serious threat to the security of society. Katherine Mary Knight was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, becoming the first woman in Australian history to gain such a punishment. In June 2006, Kathy attempted to make an appeal on her sentence as she felt the punishment did not fit the crime, and she should be eligible for parole. Of course, her appeal was dismissed with Judge McClellan writing in his judgment, "This was an appalling crime, almost beyond contemplation in a civilized society." 68-year-old Kathy is still living out her days at Silverwater Women's Correctional Center, where she has reportedly taken an interest in being a mediator amongst fellow inmates. Despite her vicious actions outside of prison, she has not displayed such acts of wickedness behind bars and is known to be a leader in the facility. Regardless of how well-behaved Katherine Knight seems to be after all these years, the residents of Aberdeen have dubbed and will continue to remember her as Australia's Hannibal Lecter. It is apparent Kathy's mental state had been an issue her entire life, stemming from her less than stellar childhood. Though time and time again, men would allow themselves to be victimized and vilified by this dreadful woman.